I know what was the excuse, Mr. Chairman?
Comsec, please answer the query of Congressman Abante. Please.
Sa social media. Dito ay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Elizabeth Joy Cruz was invited and she sent an excuse letter via email.
Ano po yung kanyang excuse letter? Ano yung dahilan?
One moment, sir. I'll get it from the chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Comsec, can you kindly also try to tell us those resource persons who have not attended this committee hearing? Yung may mga excuse letter, okay yun. But those who have not reply to our request to be present on today's hearing.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chair,
Chair.
particularly first, Mr. Chair,
Yes, from Congressman Abante.
particularly I am referring to AKA Jody Vivri sapagkat matindi yung kanyang mga sinabi dito. Gusto ko talagang makita siya at makausap sapagkat dito minura niya ako. Ang sabi niya, nanay kabukuhan sa quad. Sayang kuryente sa'yo.
Sa kanya.
Yun yung pack you. Pack you. Hindi ko yun.
Akala ko ba okay lang kayong murahin, sabi niya.
Tutuloy ko lang muna.
Mr. Chairman, Congressman, don't be
Akala ko ba okay lang sa
personal,
inyong murahin, sabi
let's
ni
be more
Bible.
comprehensive on this approach.
Pinapasok ko lang po. Pinapasok ko lang
Sige, go ahead. I'll give you
Pangalawa, November 13, 2024, nagmura na naman siya. Hindi ko na babanggitin yung mura niya. Pag tinatanong kung anong legislation ginawa niyo in relation to this, BS, ano ba yung BS? BS inquiry, sasagot ka. Swelduhan ka ng taxpayers, gago. November 3, 2024, si Benny Abante at si Romel Marbil ay mga protektor ng illegal na droga dahil pilit nilang pinalabas na hindi ito gano'n kasama. Tapos sabing ganyan, si Dan Fernandez and Ace Barber's survey are depressing. Alam na nila na matatalo sila sa eleksyon. So what is the hearing for? Smoke screen for the discount. Tinabi ko ito sapagkat matindi po itong mga akusasyon na ibinigay nitong gusto ko nilang magmura Hindi na ako pupumura muna. Kaya kailangan po, itong mga to, ang tatapang nila Ang tatapang sa pagmumura, wala tayong kalaban-laban. Ngayon, pag kaharap dito, hindi makaharap dito. Mga takuti pala yung mga yan
Please hold your fire. Please.
Hindi, I'm
on the process of admission. Ano pa lang muna tayo, Congressman Abante. We can tackle that on the interpellation.
Mr. Chair, gusto ko lang pong bagitin itong kanya excuse letter. Nakalagay dito, after meaningful consultation with my lawyers, kumayag pa na abogado. I have decided to respectfully decline. Respectfully? Minumura tayo, respectfully? To share my knowledge on matters. Hindi knowledge ang kailangan natin. As the lawyers, kung libelous yung ginawa niya, o slander. Nakalagay, I would like to categorically state that I am neither paid by operators. Hindi na pinag-uusapan. Pinag-uusapan natin yung mga sinabi niya. Tapos respectfully, Elizabeth Joey Cruz. Nakikinig po sa atin, nanonood na yan.
Tapang nyo.
Kumarap ka dito, kumatapang ka. Hirap sa iyo, nagmumura ka.
Kung matapang kayo, bakit dyan sa quad?
Kumarap ka dito. Namo.
Chairman.
Bakit sa quadcom nyo?
Please observe, refrain from laughing or whatever expression you wanted to please observe decency and of course
Chair, I move that we strike out.
with all due respect with Congressman Abante, I I feel your sentiment, no? I feel your sentiment. But we are in the process of finding out yung pong implementation of the 10175. And I respect your expression. But what I'm trying to tell you is to refrain from the fire that you wanted to express, But for now, nandun pa lang po tayo sa administrative matter, and we wanted to finish that. And then we will be discussing, or we will be approving the ground rules. Wala pa po yung ground rules, and kaya nga po, sana yung kay Chairman Abante doon papatak yan sa ground rules. Anyway, having said that, siguro we'll proceed to the next item.
Mr. Chair,
is to approve.
so that we can have an orderly hearing, we must first approve the ground rules. I believe that the COMSEC has already distributed copies of the ground rules to the members present. Mr. Chair, I move to approve the ground rules.
Yes, there's a motion to approve the ground rules. And I believe that the members of this committee have already received the yung pong ground rules natin, and you have already read it. So, siguro, I need a second motion for this. Any second motion? This was duly seconded. Any objection? Hearing none, the said motion is now approved.
This is why importante yung letters, guys. Kasi kung dun sa letters,
So the
dun
next item of
nakalagay
our
lahat ng
agenda
kailangan
is
mong malaman. Tungkol dito sa hearing.
Samora.
I would like to reiterate my earlier motion to strike out the expletive that was mentioned by my idol, Representative Abante.
Idol.
Second motion.
Mr. Chair, the motion.
I object because it was not expletive. Sinabi ko lang, namo. That can mean anything. That can mean anything.
Ano problema? Hindi ba sakop ng freedom of speech ang mura ngayon? So,
If that is the... Huh?
So it was seconded, Mr. Chairman. And the objection ni Congressman Abante, it's up to the members if they will vote for it. For the objection ni Chairman Abante.
1 minute suspension.
so pati ang pagmumura, hindi pwede. Talaga? Hindi yan kasama sa proteksyon ng freedom of speech? Kailan pa?
Assume. So there's a motion to strike out the word that was
Nandiyan si
delivered
alias
by
Pimchu.
Congressman Abante, and this was duly seconded. Any objection? That motion is approved.
Mr. Chair, I would like to manifest na because it was the motion made by she's just like a daughter to me because her father is a very good friend of mine. So I would like to withdraw my objection, although it is not actually an expletive.
Yeah.
But I'm withdrawing it for the sake of Mr. Chair.
So the next item on our agenda is the administering the oath of the resource persons. Those who have been invited to attend this committee hearing, please stand up, and the COMSEC is hereby directed to administer the oath of the resource persons.
May we request all the resource persons invited to stand, raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this inquiry? Thank you. Please take your seat.
Mr. Chair, once again, we would like to have an orderly proceedings of the hearings. So therefore, some reminders to the members, because after this, we will now proceed to the deliberation. Please be reminded that pursuant to our ground rules, House members shall register with the committee secretary and shall be recognized on a first to register basis. Members shall be given 10 minutes each for their interpellation, excluding the answers of the resource persons. No member, except the chairpersons or the presiding officer, and the senior deputy speaker shall be allowed to speak or make interjections during the course of the interpellation of a member unless and until recognized by the lead chairperson or the presiding officer. Lastly, we enjoin everyone to observe proper decorum and basic courtesy in our proceedings. Please address your questions to the co-chairs and wait to be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair Bimendal. So, muna tapos din. The next is Chairman Aquino for the discussion proper. Please discuss it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the permission of my co-chairs, I would like to propose that we first hear from the academe, then government agencies and independent media organizations to give us a situationer on the social media landscape. Each presenter shall have 10 minutes. Thank you.
So the proposed flow of discussion, una po yung academe, si Dr. Jonathan Ong, then academe muna, then government agencies, then the independent media organization. This will be the flow of our discussion. But for the meantime, going back to the administrative matter, Congressman Chairman Chairman Paduano, have something to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a matter of procedure, Mr. Chairman. And a protocol of every committee hearing, Mr. Chairman, all resource person being invited in every hearing and absent should have an excuse letter or explanation. And if that excuse letter is valid and acceptable to the committee members, so we will just invite them to the next hearing. But for all those resource persons with an excuse letter man. Up to Congressman Abante, what will be the next step for this committee for his or her invitation in the next hearing? I just want to make it clear, Mr. Chairman, that all invitees who are not present in today's hearing the committee should have a proper disposition with regards to their invitation, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So what's the pleasure of the body?
Mr. Chair, in relation to what Congressman Paduano said, may I know if we're going to invite again those social bloggers?
What's the pleasure of the body for those who have been invited and have not written us any excuse letter?
Well, to me, Mr. Chair, to me, Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
let's invite them again. If they don't show up or make an excuse letter, then I'll make a motion that we issue a show cause order on them.
So basically, manifestation by Congressman Abante that those who have not written any excuse letter will be invited again in the next hearing. Actually, hindi ito motion, but it's a procedure that is being governed as, no? So, doon sa mga resource persons na hindi po nakarating, na hindi nagpadala ng mga excuse letter, you are being invited again in the next hearing. And for those who have written an excuse letter, what's the pleasure of this body on the excuse letters that they have sent us? Because they have written as letters.
Mr. Chairman, kasi po, in our procedure, depende po sa content ng excuse letter if it is valid or not. That's why, I suggest, kaya lang, tumatagal tayo dito, I suggest we will discuss each and every excuse letter. Kasi magkaiba po reason at saka content ng letter.
Correct.
Diba?
Oo.
For example, in the
And
case
sige, yung mga
of
napadala
the
din ng
person
letter.
that was mentioned by Congressman Abante, ganun po yung sagot niya. Shall we invite her? Babae ba? Shall we invite her again? Or issue a show cause order? For me, Mr. Chairman, that is offensive and we should also issue a show cause order for her. And we will not just invite her in the next hearing, we will issue a show cause order for that person. Mr. Chairman.
According sa, okay, thank you so much for that, Congressman Tuano. According sa Section 9 of our rules, witnesses shall be granted more than two postponements of appearance before the committee without justifiable cause. So we can issue a show cause order because wala silang justifiable reason.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Congressman Ako, please.
we must distinguish the resource person who was invited but did not offer any excuse from the resource person who was invited but came up with a letter excuse. So why should we treat them the same? According to our protocols, as we have done in the previous committee hearings, those invited persons who did not offer any excuse, the next order is for them, for the committee to issue a show cause order to explain why. And for those people who offered an excuse for their absence, it's up for the committee to determine whether the excuse is acceptable or not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think we have so many excuse letters that were given to us by the COMSEC.
Mr. Chair,
And
particularly,
yes.
Yun na lang pag-usapan
the excuse
nila.
order,
Excuse letter.
the excuse letter of this Miss Elizabeth Joey Cruz. She said, I know that the time of the committee is precious and I am coming from deep concern on prudent utilization of public resources. Mr. Chair, this is contemptible. This is not respecting this committee. How dare she would say the prudent utilization of public resources? I therefore make a motion, Mr. Chair, that we issue a show cause order on this Elizabeth Joey Cruz. I move therefore, Mr. Chair.
So there's a motion to issue a show cause order to
Nakikonsel na
that
kayo, madam.
resource person. What's the name? Elizabeth Cruz. And there was a second motion. Any objection? Hearing that, the said motion is now approved. Yun po yung merong excuse letter. And there's still a lot. Like, for example, yung kay Sean Wayne, kay Maui Spencer, kay Ethel Garcia. But you have to read the content of their excuse letter. Like, for example, one of these, you want to move on this, or you want to discuss this on a later part of the discussion?
Discuss it now.
Or you want to have an omnibus motion with all of this, But there are excuse letters which are valid. Like, for example, this personality, nasa Singapore siya. So, katulad ito, out of the country, si Maui Spencer, for not being there in our country yet. Nasa Singapore siya for vacation. So,
Oo
I think,
nga. Oo nga,
excuse
Richard.
yung kanya,
Pikon na pikon.
Yung Tony Abiles,
So, paano
Sige.
naging fake news ang namura ka, Abante?
after
And
having
is
discussion with
that
isa-isa
part
natin kung
of
gusto nyo.
freedom of
Okay,
speech, ang
after having discussion
pagmumura?
with my lawyer, I
So,
regret to inform you that
ibabawal
I won't
nyo
be
na ang
attending the
pagmumura.
hearing today because the objective
And
of the hearing
anong-
is an attempt to curtail the people's right to expression. So,
Ano connection nun sa
June
fake
Venus.
news ang namura ka?
With that excuse letter, Mr. Chairman, I found it not valid and I moved to issue a show cause order for that June Venus.
So, there's a issue a show cause order to this resource person. Any second motion? Second. There's a second motion. Any objection? Hearing none, the said motion is now approved.
Okay, now, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, para lang doon sa mga nanonood, no? Ito pong hearing na ito ay hindi para kitin o isuppress yung freedom of speech nila. Wala ho kaming ganong layunin. Ang layunin po natin dito ay gawa ng pulisiya ang paggamit ng social media platforms. Dapat po meron tayong disiplina, meron tayong code of conduct, meron tayong ethics sa paggamit nitong social media. Hindi yung pagbukas mo ng social media, magmumura
So,
ka.
Duterte supporters
Meron dyan,
lang
nagso-social media,
ang
nagbablog.
covered?
Walang ginawa araw-araw kundi manawagan ng kaguluhan sa ating bansa. Nananawagan ng people power, nananawagan ng kudeta. Yung ba ay tama, Mr. Chair? Ang punto lang natin dito is magkaroon tayo ng ganitong ng regulasyon o regulatory policy para kagaya po ng mga broadcasters, meron po silang KBP. Kagaya po ng mga manunulat sa dyaryo, meron po silang NUJP. They're all bound by rules and regulations. So in the social media, the use of social media platforms, unfortunately, wala po tayong ganyan sa ngayon. At hindi po pwede na gawin pong rason ng mga yan na meron tayong freedom, na kinekertail natin yung freedom of speech nila. Huwag niyo po lukuhin ang taong bayan. Wala hong curtailment o suppression ng freedom of speech dito. Kaya nga kayo inimbita rito eh. Diba? Kaya kayo inimbita dito para magpahayag din kayo. Hindi po ba yan ay tamang freedom of expression? Ba't ngayon nagpapadala kayo ng mga sulat na hindi kayo pwede kasi hindi kayo naniniwala sa layunin ng pagdinig na ito? Wag po kayo magtago sa mga ganyan. Ang tatapang nyo. Sabi nga ni Congressman Abante, in the advent of social media, suddenly Filipinos become political analysts. They become journalists. They become experts. We need your wisdom. Diba? Kayo, ang gagaling nyo magtuligsa eh. Dito nyo gawin para nang sa ganun, makagawa tayo ng isang polisiya na hindi po maabuso ito. Ngayon, nandiyan kayo sa social media. Kung mag-retire kayo, wala na kayo, hindi na kayo nagbablog. Paano kaya yung mga susunod na mga vloggers? Yun lamang po ang layunin natin dito. Kaya huwag kayong magdahilan na hindi kayo nagpupunta rito dahil hindi kayo pupunta dito kasi hindi kayo naniniwala sa layunin ng investigasyon na ito. We want to craft a policy, a remedial legislation so that there will be discipline and code of ethics in the practice and use of our social media platform, Mr. Chair.
So bakit mga Duterte supporters lang ang
Thank you.
invited?
7 na lang naman. So tapusin na natin, maikli na lang to.
So bakit hindi
Ito, may excuse
kami
letter
lang,
din si
mga
Mark
Duterte
Anthony de la
supporters,
Cruz,
ang
Lopez. I was
regulated?
supposed to stand in front of this committee today in what has been asserted as inquiry on fake news peddlers, narco-bloggers, and Pogo-funded bloggers in aid of legislation. I would have loved to really open up and tell you my story on how I evolved from being an ordinary citizen. Mahaba po siya, mga 5 pages siya. Pero tinitingnan ko po, you see Mr. Fernandez and Barbers, I reiterate that I am a citizen of the Republic and I actually understand that the premise of your so-called inquiry is without basis, nor cannot understand on solid legal ground. I therefore invoke my rights as provided for in the Constitution and decline your invitation. So, mahaba po yung kanyang letter and I cannot understand fully, but this is the content of the letter. So, what's the pleasure of the body?
Mr. Chairman, once again, the letter is sent to this committee is not valid. I move to issue a consent for that invited guest.
Okay, so we issue a focus order to Mr. Mark Anthony Lopez. Any second motion? Second. Any objection? Hearing none? Yes, this motion is now approved. Okay, ito naman galing kay Attorney Trixie Angeles. I respectfully decline this invitation as I question the legality of the inquiry as well as the proposed legislation for being violative of the constitutional guarantee of free speech.
Is he a lawyer? Is he a lawyer?
Yes, Attorney Trixie, a lawyer. I think, attorney. So what's the pleasure of the body?
Mr. Chairman, I might have two motions, Mr. Chairman. First motion, Mr. Chairman, is to issue a show cause order to Attorney what?
Trixie Angeles.
Attorney Angeles.
Show cause din yan.
That is my first motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, about the
Second motion.
duly seconded, any objection? Hearing none, the said motion is now approved.
My second motion, Mr. Chairman, is for the legal department of this House to study if ever there is a violation because he is an officer of the court. And he should respect the constitutional duty of Congress. And question of legality, Mr. Chairman, I respectfully move that we will consult the legal department of this House for a possible disbarment case against Attorney Trixie Repelito. Yes po. So move, Mr. Chairman.
The secretary by directed. Oh, no, it's a motion. So there's a motion. Second. Wait. Your motion is to ask the legal
The
department.
legal department for a possible disbursement case against Attorney Tricia Angeles.
So there's a motion cited by Congressman Paduano. Any second the motion? Duly seconded. Any objection? Hearing none, the said motion is now approved. About Richard Mata, thank you for your invitation. I just received this yesterday, just a day before the event. I consulted my lawyer and was advised not to attend. The late invitation plus the unclear purpose of the event will support the freedom of speech. So, what's the pleasure of this body?
The same thing with the others, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to
I think we have a three
issue show cause order.
There's a motion. Any second the motion? During second, any objection? Hearing none, the said motion is now approved. About the Aaron Peña. While I initially wanted to accept, I would like to respectfully decline your invitation to share my knowledge on matters that were raised by Representative Ace Barbers in his privileged speeches.
Yan ata
Last
yung may
year,
mga
after a series of
mga
consultation with my
natanggap na
lawyers,
letter.
I would like to categorically state that I'm neither paid by POGO operators nor drug lords, and so my knowledge is not used for the goal of the joint committee. Same thing. Motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to issue a show cause order for
There's a motion to issue a show cause order to this person. Any second the motion? Second the motion. Duly seconded. And objection, hearing none, the said motion is approved. And Cassette Chu. This in reference to your invitation to the joint inquiry congressional hearing on social media. After careful consideration, I would like to respectfully turn down your invitation due to these following reasons. Mahaba po yung reasons. 4 pages. And sa nababasa ko ba ang tema niya ay justification of the laws protecting the rights.
Bakit kami
So, I
lang ang
think,
invited? Kami lang ang i-regulate.
What's the pleasure again?
Kaya daw ginawa yun para merong
It's
regulation
not about
at
calculations
policy
or whatever.
sa
It's
social
also
media.
justifying not to be present
So,
at today's hearing.
once again, Mr. Chairman, I move to issue a show
Bakit
cause order.
99%? Bakit
Show cause
halos,
order to meet
ano,
Cassette
halos
Chu, and
puro
this was duly
Duterte
seconded.
supporters?
Hearing no objection, the said motion
Isa
is
lang
now
at ang hindi Duterte supporter dyan eh. So kami lang ang
about the
i-regulate.
Sean Wayne. It's a long excuse as well. All issues and not of the country. So I think same. No, it's not out of the country. So, nag-decline lang siya. And this goes also to Miss Ethel Garcia. Para yun ang point natin. So, dalawa po sila. Same naman ang reason almost.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we issue a show cause order for both the invited senators mentioned by the chairman. So,
There's
move,
a
Mr. Chairman.
motion to issue show cause order to Miss Ethel Garcia and Sean Wayne. Duly seconded. Any objection? Hearing none, the said motion is now approved. So now we have the
Mr. Chairman, just one last admin.
11:30 na.
Mr. Chairman, the committee has received a letter coming from the Philippine Entertainment Portal, and they are requesting for their presence to be invited to the next hearing, Mr. Chairman, so that they can also give some inputs with regards to the House resolution that we are tackling in today's hearing, Mr. Chairman. So move, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
so we will be inviting them over as well. There's a motion duly seconded by Congressman Luiso. Any objection? The said motion on the said motion, hearing no objection, the said motion is now approved. Okay, punta na po tayo sa flow ng presentation natin. Kanina, sinabi po natin yung academe po mauna. We will be recognizing I assume si Dr. Rachel Khan, Associate Dean, UP College of Media and Communication. Pakinggan po natin yung mga taga-academe natin. Go ahead, andiyan ba siya?
Pumauna to kasi mag-out siya.
Okay, punahin po muna natin si Dr. Jonathan Ong, University of Massachusetts. Andiyan po ba siya? Bias to Maxwell. So, bias to. Sige, go ahead. Sige,
Na ano? And I don't think
sige, Dr.
sasalitain
Ong,
siya
you are
mag-
recognized. Please proceed.
academic research and tech policy papers on social media and disinformation. Since 2016, I've collaborated with many news and nonprofit organizations in the country. Several of them are invited and present in today's hearings. I've also presented in previous hearings on fake news at the Senate related to elections as well as on foreign interference.
For a while.
So ang una kong
Dr.
layunin-
Jonathan, for a while, we have problem with the audio. Can you refrain from speaking just yet? So, technical, can you kindly increase lang po yung volume? Mr. Dr. Jonathan Ong, you can now proceed, please. We'll
Okay.
just try to check it out.
All right. Can you hear me fine? And can you see the presentation?
Much better. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, so magandang umaga po. I'm a professor based
Sir Jonathan Ong, Dr.
before I
Jonathan
was a
Ong, again,
professor sa
I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm a disinformation researcher and director of Sigla Research Center based po sa Manila, and I've been publishing academic research on social media and disinformation since 2016, and I've collaborated with many human rights organizations and newsrooms, some of them present in today's hearings. I've also presented at the Senate on fake news and elections, as well as on foreign interference. So ang una ko pong layunin sa araw na ito ay magbahagi ng research on disinformation. Number 2 is to review trends in global context. It's important to conduct comparative research with our neighboring countries kung ano-ano na nga ba yung mga effective solutions based on other countries' direct experiences, including with legislation. Pag-usapan po natin kung paano maaaring suportahan at posibleng pondohan ng gobyerno ang iba't ibang mga interventions. Third, it's important that we share lessons of what has worked and what hasn't in the Philippine context, and what risks that researchers, journalists, and other organizations in this space have been facing. Fourth, I also wanted to share the vision of Sigla Research Center and myself as a sociologist in terms of tech justice here in the Philippine context. So my colleagues advocate for tech justice solutions that are sustainable, long-term, and aligned with our country's cultural context. So first, I wanted to share this free and open access resource for policymakers and also educators, curated by Sigla Research Center. You can visit siglaresearchcenter.org and check out this research archive. Ito pong research archive collects many professors' previously published research and policy papers on disinformation in influence operations. So na-publish na po siya sa iba't ibang bansa, pero na-collect po siya dito sa research archive. Altogether, and reviewing all of them, you can learn about trends across 3 election cycles from 2016, 2019, and 2022 elections. Most recently, we have one paper that also summarizes trends across all 3. Some of you might know that as a sociologist, my specific methodology has also been focused on understanding the business of disinformation for hire. Ito po yung paano magpatakbo ng digital operations during elections and yung mga kampanya, at kung ano-ano yung mga klase ng operators na kumikita ng pera from disinformation campaigning. We also include papers in this archive led by other academics such as Fatima Gao, who discussed influencer marketing and paano kumikita ng pera ang mga influencers bawat halalan using advertising technology of social media platforms. Finally, we have collected research about counter-disinformation actors in the Philippines and kung ano-ano yung mga interventions na na-implement dito sa ating bansa. So, baka may mga nakakaalam na po sa inyo itong research paper published noong 2018 entitled Architects of Network Disinformation. I was asked to share this with you again today. This research was co-authored with Jason Cabañas, and this analyzed the behind-the-scenes work of disinformation campaigns, how they are organized, the different kinds of workers involved, who sets the agenda, and who executes the campaign. So our research involved interviews with politicians, political operators, at various levels of the hierarchy. Kasama na dito mga advertising and PR specialists, influencers, fake account operators, and digital volunteers. This academic paper has also been translated as a podcast produced by Puma Podcast, where we interviewed disinformation whistleblowers. So ito po yung mga operators na nagtrabaho sa mga political campaigns, and you can hear from them directly. Maririnig nyo how they were recruited into their work at paano sila kumikita ng pera. 3 of our findings: political trolls are not tech brainwashed, uneducated
Totoo, hindi
rural
sila
voters in rural
hindi sila
areas.
ano diyan.
Some of them are from
Interesado.
middle
Ang
class
gusto lang nila
families, and
mabalikan
they
nila
see
yung mga
political
vloggers.
trolling as just a side gig, a hustle to make ends meet. There are different kinds of workers, and we need to hold accountable the people at the top, yung mga elites in advertising and PR industries. Ibig sabihin, sana wag lang po natin habulin yung mga low-level workers, yung mga bots, but pati rin yung mga mastermind. Pero mahirap pong gawin itong kind of research. Ang naging pangalan po sa methodology ng research na ito ay disinformation for hire, yung pag-aaral ng paano nagiging hanap buhay, kumbaga, ang paggawa ng fake news sa industriya. So ang napag-aralan namin ay ito. Investigative research into the business of disinformation is risky and costly. It requires financial investment and also legal support. So yung mga researchers and journalists who do this are also threatened when doing this kind of risky research. This is difficult to execute because it requires the cooperation of whistleblowers. Ibig sabihin, hindi lang ito monitoring kung ano yung nakikita natin sa social media. Kailangan may ma-invite tayo na magpa-interview sa mga researcher ng mga tao na insiders talaga sa industriya. This means that we need civil society to support worker power movement building in the digital and creative industries. Kailangan ma-encourage natin sila at magkaisa pag-usapan ng ethics or lack thereof sa industriya. So, may iba't ibang interventions na nasubukan na. So for example, codes of ethics have been attempted by legal advocacy groups like Lente, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Unfortunately, these attempts have had very little buy-in from advertising and PR agencies themselves because it threatens their ways of working and their bottom line. Thus, it has become easier to just hunt and fact-check low-level trolls and bots rather than to hold accountable itong mga masterminds. So, pag-usapan din natin ng foreign interference. And it's important that we review prior research. Of course, it's important to invest in cybersecurity monitoring of foreign interference. Ito po yung pag-track ng mga bot accounts operated overseas and how they interfere on wedge issues, such as how Chinese accounts were discovered by Facebook's own investigation as pushing CCP propaganda around the West Philippine Sea. However, we also need to fund local investigative research that can probe the transnational labor networks to expose itong mga financial transactions during campaigns, especially during elections. So for example, during the 2019 elections, we found at least one example of a Chinese mainland business tycoon funding a local politician's digital operations for a mayoral race. Dahil may personal business interests siya sa lugar na iyon at naisip niya na matulungan itong local politician. This should also count as foreign interference and ways of circumventing campaign finance regulation in the country. So, kasama na din sa pag-discuss ng foreign interference, we need to understand how it can come from many different countries, including from our allied countries, such as the United States. Reuters journalists last year exposed the Pentagon as seeding anti-vaccine memes in our country at the time of COVID. We need to pursue unanswered questions from this expose, including identifying possible local Filipino collaborators who participated in the translation and dissemination of this US-funded disinformation campaign. So I'm almost at the very end of this presentation. I just wanted to highlight research from other neighboring countries about the risks of top-down government legislation against fake news. So it's important to recognize that many human rights organizations and international legal scholars have raised alarm about the global trend of anti-fake news laws being used as quote-unquote weaponized lawfare. Ang sabi po ng maraming eksperto ay ang mga batas ukol sa fake news ay karanasan nagagamit in an inconsistent and arbitrary fashion.
Oh, invited
often
daw
used
ako
by
pero walang
incumbent
letter.
politicians and governments to target activists, critics, journalists, and opposition parties. So kahit mabuti ang intensyon ng batas, kung hindi specific at transparent ang batas at ang mga implementers na ito, top-down regulation can actually do more harm than good. Kaya nga, kahit UNESCO, nakaaway siya ng mga civil society organizations around Southeast Asia in 2023. So nagalit ang mga civil society organizations sa UNESCO for trying to encourage governments to have control of social media content. They have 3 objections. In effect, this would be rubber stamping local overregulation. It would embolden authoritarian regulators, and it would incentivize platforms to comply with illegitimate government requests. So these objections are not new. Back in 2018, the Center for the Protection of Journalists spoke out against how journalists have been imprisoned on charges of fake news spreading. It's important to note that we should consider different kinds of legislation, hindi lang po imprisonment and fines penalizing social media users. Pwede din po ay legislation focused at big tech corporation na focus siya on content corrections. So mandating big tech to implement content corrections, or number 2, administrative compliance measures for participating in transparency mechanisms with independent researchers. So I'm almost at the final slide, and so now, given the risks of top-down legislation that might do harm than good, yung advocacy ng Sigla Research Center is kailangan civil society-driven ang lunas sa fake news. Kailangan angkop sa ating konteksto. We need to have full awareness of risks of regulatory capture and overreach. So these are 4 very practical solutions that would be more civil society driven rather than top-down and overreaching. First is to broaden the focus beyond content takedowns. Government should be supporting independent research and civil society to mitigate local businesses of disinformation for hire. So kahit meron pong examples of foreign interference, mas typical pa rin itong local disinformation. Number 2, you can support whole of society coalitions where academics, journalists, legal experts, librarians, educators, and human rights agencies apply diverse methodologies to promote a healthy public sphere. Hindi lang isa yung methodology, but kailangan iba't ibang sektor ng ating lipunan ay mag-collaborate. Number 3, you can target social media platforms. You can pressure them for transparency initiatives and external audits of their policies as well as their algorithms. These can be reviewed by independent, non-partisan researchers and civil society organizations. Number 4, and this is recognizing the broader context of an inevitable contraction of funding because of U.S. foreign aid being contracting, as well as funding from big tech corporations for fact-checking also being halted. You can augment the funding of civil society who are the front line for fighting disinformation. And I just wanted to shout out some of those civil society organizations that you can be supporting and the different methodologies that they have been using to fight fake news. We argue that we need to support all of these methodologies and support ways that they can all work collaboratively rather than work in silos. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jonathan Corpus Ong.
Tama.
for that informative presentation. Maybe later, the members of this committee will be asking questions, but for the meantime, we'll be
See?
proceeding
Wala
to the
silang
next
tanong kasi nga hindi naman sila interesado sa iyo.
resource person who will be
Ang
presenting as well.
interesado nila
So, your
ay
University of the
ipahiya ang
Philippines,
mga
Dr. Rachel
vloggers.
Ican, Associate Dean College of Mass
Sabi
Communication.
ko sa iyo, hindi naman
You
sila
are
interesado
now
diyan.
recognized, ma'am? By, present siya. Sige, ma'am, you are now recognized, please.
Honorable Chair, distinguished members of Congress, ladies and gentlemen, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Correct ko lang po yung sa designation, tapos na po yung term ko as Associate Dean. I am a Professor of Journalism at the UP College of Mass Communication. I am also a co-founder of Check.ph, isa pong collaborative coalition ng mga fact-checkers dito sa Pilipinas, where we strive to cite or help the public distinguish disinformation narratives. If you allow me, I have slides po for the presentation, if it can be flashed.
Sige, go ahead, ma'am.
Kailangan ko po yung slides kasi yun yung visual, yun yung unang visual po na
Yeah, technical,
importante.
please. Ayan na, ma'am.
Ayan, salamat. Next slide, please. It's very important for us to be able to distinguish.
Oh. What happened?
Ang mali. However, ibang usapan to sa disinformation. Yung mga
Wala. Ako ba lag o yung mismong video?
to sa disinformation, yung mga nagpo-provide within society. Ang malinformation naman po ay sadyang nananakit po ng tao. It usually attacks reputations through disinformation, no? So, nakikita na, for example, ang deepfake ay example po ng isang malinformation dahil you are already impersonating a real person and putting words in that person's mouth. So, ito po, we have to distinguish the intent, no, in tackling the area of information disorder. Next slide, please. So I thought I would just summarize what I have to say in ABCD. Ang abakada po ng disinformation. Ang una po ay manipulative actors. They are people with clear groups, institutions with clear intention to disrupt democratic process or the information ecosystem.
The actual hearing, the Tricom.
Deceptive behaviors.
Deceptive behavior.
And then I'll go through it given the limited time one by one. Can we have the next slide? So I'll tackle it more systematically.
Ayan.
So una po, manipulative actors. So as Jonathan had said earlier, dun sa nakasite po sa kanyang study Architects of Network Disinformation, ito po ay mga institutions, mga tao, mga groups na nananadyang nagkakalat ng disinformation. I listed here some examples of these manipulative actors, such as yung tinatawag ni or na-label ni Craig Silverman, isang journalist who focuses on disinformation also in the US, na mga black PR agencies. These are boutique PR agencies that really focus on, sometimes they operate during elections to either attack or to attack certain individuals during the election period or feed disinformation in other forms like in environment issues, no health issues, mga ganyan. So sadya silang nagta-target ng audiences. Many of them are not necessarily members or officially recognized public relation firms in the country, but are also ad hoc. And then po yung mga POGO na or community-based fake account operators. No, so ang danger po ng isa pang danger ng POGO ay they have the machinery and the equipment to operate not just online gaming, but they can easily convert to scamming and other forms of harmful activity. And then, of course, apart from them, you also have community-based fake account operators. Ito yung mga grupong na-hire, usually kasama rin sila ng mga black PR na siniset up para mag-attack ng or kalat ng disinformation. Then of course, you have the hired trolls, yung mga tao nila, hired influencers. Now this can be individuals who
Alam nyo kung
are
sino yung may
selling
mga
their
troll
platform,
account na nag-hype sa mga post
the highest
niya.
bidder, not to be able to
Post pala
share
nila.
whatever information their financier wants to give out. Now, whether it's just for propaganda sake or it's disinformation. And then of course, yung grassroots supporters, ito po yung hindi ito bayad, ito yung mga na-involve lang sa disinformation dahil masyado silang, for example, loyal sa isang
Loyalista.
personality. No, so kung kahit anong sabihin itong influencer na to, i-echo nila.
Loyal
Sort of
daw.
blind loyalty. So many of them
Loyalista. Kahit influencer sila makagago.
victims also of disinformation. Unfortunately, kahit na biktima sila rin yung nagpapakalat ng maling impormasyon.
Loyalista.
Alright, so the commonality here is that they are not operating in and for themselves, but are guns for hire, where the weapon is disinformation and the aim is the manipulation of the public
Ha?
sphere. Ang
Akala ko ba
sometimes
grassroots
po, we
supporters
can-
hindi sila
next slide,
bayad
please.
tapos guns for hire?
There is some times
Akala ko
when
ba
it's state-sponsored
yung grassroots
disinformation.
supporters hindi bayad.
As we can see here,
Loyal
I
lang
have
sila,
two
tapos biglang
studies from
ang common
that
sa
were
kanila,
published
guns
by
for
the
hire?
Deutsche Welles about Russian disinformation targeting Germany, and published also by the BBC News of Chinese-led state propaganda and disinformation. Next po, letter B, deceptive behavior.
B.
I'm narrowing this down to what I think is the most threatening. First is the inauthentic coordinated behavior. Ito po, as Jonathan had also mentioned earlier, pwede po nating hanapan ng paraan para mabawasan to at to go after those who actually finance this. This is the multiple digital actors working together to create false impressions of popularity, consensus, and authenticity. Minsan po sa isang opisina lang, kunyari marami silang hawak na cellphone, marami silang hawak na mga mobile numbers, pero sa isang tao or isang grupo lang nanggagaling, making it appear that something is popular or viral. Clickbait rin, ginagamit ito as a tool, whether as a meme, thumbnail, to attract unsuspecting viewers.
Baka mga kakampi
And
nyo yung
astroturfing,
tatamaan
it's a
dyan.
creation of or an illusion of grassroots support when it's really just bots and also influence peddlers. As we said earlier, next slide, deepfakes falls under the deceptive behaviors we find in the internet today. Marami po lang na biktima ng mga celebrity tsaka mga news personalities. Mahanap nyo sa web na kunyari nagbebenta ng mga health products pero hindi naman totoo. Si Presidente po ay nabiktima rin ito, yung if you recall the issue on, may sinabi daw siya sa
So,
West Philippine Sea na hindi naman
siya,
totoo.
West Philippine Sea na hindi to.
Then harmful content, see,
Ayan,
next slide please.
Akala ko yung sa drugs.
So there are
Wait, bakit hindi niya sinabi
several
yung
types of harmful content. I just
nag-fake yung
have
nagganito?
enumerations of 8 here.
Ooh.
False medical information, incitement to violence, no, ito yung hate speech, encourages and glorifies violence, including suicides, defamation, election
Bakit hindi niya
interference,
sinabing
financial
deepfake?
fraud,
Yung
imposter
video ni
content,
Bongbong
yung imposter
na
content,
nagaganon.
yung nag-hack
Diba?
into legitimate websites and creating a clone website. So, akala ng mga viewers, pinupuntahan nila yung, kunyari, pinupuntahan nila yung Inquirer, yung pala ay clone site siya ng mga disinformers. And then, public safety risks also, yung mga fake emergencies or yung mga fake na humihingi ng tulong dahil sa isang typhoon or whatever, pero wala pa naman sila doon or hindi naman sila talaga apektado. So next slide, some examples of harmful medical content that can be found on the web. Dipo distribution, next slide. Disinformation distribution networks. Like we said, the thing about social media, it operates on algorithms. So, nag-create itong mga algorithm na to. Next slide, please. Nag-create itong mga algorithms na to, ng mga echo chambers. So, lalo ng kung panay disinformation yung laman ng social media mo, then it's likely na yun lang yung nakikita mo at yun rin yung nasa spread mo sa internet. Automated bots also are there to boost algorithm para sila yung nagva-viral at sila yung nag-a-appear sa ating mga social media feeds. And then of course, yung mga paid influencers, because of the number of their subscribers or their viewership, they can easily affect the algorithms in favor of whatever they're posting. And then of course, yung mga fake accounts, ito yung mga either inauthentic accounts or secondary accounts of mga clone accounts of real people. So some policy, next slide please. I'd like to echo what Jonathan said earlier, but I also have a few of my own here, in my policy analysis and recommendations. So first, there's a need to balancing the need to combat fake news with protecting fundamental rights is a complex challenge that requires extensive evaluation and flexibility in adjustment. So hindi ho ito black and white na issue. Kailangan po the bottom line is still the protection of our freedom of expression, freedom of the press, especially the right of the people to information. Current laws in the ASEAN, such as the Malaysia's Anti-Fake News Act of 2018 and Singapore's Protection from Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Act, or PORMA, while sounding positive in combating disinformation, is more of an obstruction of civil liberties and media freedom. Kung titignan natin po itong dalawang sample na laws na to, malabo po, very ambiguous po yung definition nila ng disinformation. So kahit ano pwede mo siya ipasok. Kahit na legitimate reporting po ng news, especially on areas of corruption or public complaint of, let's say, services not rendered by public utilities, etc., pwede pong masakop dito. So it's really against freedom of expression. Pero merong silang, well, in terms of PORMA, I will mention a few that provisions that they're kinda okay. But first, emphasis on media and information literacy by involving various stakeholders, including governments, technology companies, civil society organizations, and the academe in developing and implementing strategies to educate the public. Yung current nating MIL courses sa grades 11 and 12, they are only one quarter. So it's not enough considering that it's now as important as reading and writing and arithmetic, no? Yung 3 R's, kasama na dapat po ang media literacy, which means that it's hindi lang po sa grades 11 and 12, dapat po bumaba ito ng grade 1 pa lang, ay tinuturuan na natin ng mga bata maging media literate. Penalizing masterminds, no? Especially black PR firms engaged in disinformation. Yung mga influence operators po na sinasabi, there has to be a way to penalize the masterminds rather than yung individual trolls. Kasi wala ho tayong mararating kung maghahabol tayo ng individuals rather than yung naghara sa kanila or yung nagbabayad sa kanila.
See?
Some solutions in other countries, next slide please.
Bored
Sa
kayo,
Finland,
ano?
they have implemented a comprehensive media literacy
Bored kayo.
program in schools and the general population, leading to higher levels of public awareness and resilience against disinformation.
Hindi
Sa
masaya na wala
Taiwan, they
yung
have
mga
adopted a
vloggers.
rapid response mechanism to counter disinformation involving fact-checking organizations, government agencies, and social media platforms. This approach has been effective in addressing false information quickly. At sana ho ito ma-replicate natin dito. Kaya nating i-replicate to if there is collaboration among and support with fact-checking organizations, especially now that Meta has removed their partnership with third-party fact-checkers. Yung sa Singapore PORMA law, they also have applied various contexts of quickly addressing and correcting false information. So meron silang executive rapid response where they publish the correction together with the false information para makita kagad ng public kung ano yung mali at ano yung tamang information. So ito po yung mga aking masasuggest at this time. Thank you po.
Thank you so much, Ma'am.
Wait, ulitin nga natin.
Uh,
Ay, ulitin ako. Wait lang.
Those who actually
Yung tungkol
finance
sa
this,
deepfake. Tungkol sa
this
deepfake.
daw siya sa West Philippines products pero hindi naman totoo. Si Presidente po ay nabiktima rin ito yung if you recall the issue on may sinabi daw siya sa West Philippine Sea na hindi naman totoo.
Oh, bakit yung West Philippine Sea? Ang ginawa niyang example at hindi yung sumisinghot ng white powdery substance
and
as deepfake.
reiterating as well that there are differences
So hindi ba yun deepfake,
among
ma'am?
misinformation, and malinformation, as Dr. Khan had mentioned. But I want to highlight in this information, for example, from a legal perspective, there should be a justification for the regulation or whatever law that may be passed that targets this information. And it's not insurmountable. There are ways to do that. I think that the first thing that I would say is that human rights experts in the UN system or the special procedures, for example, will say that we do not punish disinformation per se, but we focus on the agenda and also the intent, which is what distinguishes this information from the others, which the intent to propagate false information for a particular agenda. And I say that because that has to be squared with our constitutional framework on freedom of expression and how expression can be regulated. I want to also reiterate the context that is important here, Your Honors, because while we do take guidance or we compare our approach to the approaches of other states, it is important to recognize that those states may not have as robust free expression environment as we do, or have different histories or experiences. For example, if we look to the laws of Germany restricting hate speech,
you will understand why their approach on hate speech is that way, a little bit stricter than most, because of their experiences with World War II and the atrocities that followed, versus the experiences of the United States, for example, which really is inclined to protect free expression in the widest breadth possible. And on that note, a lot of our doctrine and laws in the Philippines towards the U.S. approach, not entirely, but closer to that than, let's say, Germany's approach. In the same way that Canada's approach is different from ours because they have specific values, constitutional values that they want to promote, let's say, the protection of democratic society, which is something that we share with them, but that's part of their legal tests, actually. Okay. So just to reiterate some of the ways in which disinformation is propagated online, and again, I defer to the other experts on this, but these are the ways, and I think we see them being conducted, being done in platforms and elsewhere in the internet. Social engineering, for example, will employ methods that that recreate or that truncates or changes the context, or content is missing, and of course that also transforms particular content through the use of technology. Okay, and these are some of the models. Dr. Ong's work generated some of the models, and I'll defer to him regarding that. I also just want to emphasize that that companies should be able to see, social media companies, for example, should be able to see the disinformation networks because these accounts are interconnected. See, so often because of analytics and the technology that they use, they will be able to spot patterns in their platforms, and that should be visible to them. And especially when these disinformation networks cross platforms. So, for example, in the case of Meta, where you have Facebook and Instagram, they can cross platforms, and therefore it should also be visible to those companies, given that they also use algorithms and artificial intelligence to spot those. Okay, so again, your honors have already stated the effect of disinformation on our institutions. I will not reiterate that, just to also say that it also has an effect on the population and could be counterproductive to all the other education measures that we have been doing, which means more education than is called for. Okay. So these are some of the strategies that have been offered, and we'll discuss them briefly in a little bit in the context of how other countries approach it. My contribution to the discussion would be to echo that, of course, expression and content are protected under the Constitution, save under exceptions. And this is why I emphasized earlier that disinformation per se need to be carefully reckoned with, because it's such
it's more dangerous.
Some protected expression, or a lot of protected expression, might be covered by a law on disinformation. So there are ways again to deal with that from the legal standpoint, in addition to the policy recommendations. So we have fact-checking, of course, platforms do that, although as discussed by Dr. Kanmet, had taken a different path here. Media literacy. So some studies, especially, let's say this case study from West African countries, tell us that when students are taught media literacy and critical thinking skills, they are able to better combat disinformation, because the end user, or those who are targeted with this information, are able to discern the type of information that they are receiving. And so, again, to the point that was asked in the invitation to talk about education, education is really an important part of it, but really tailored education, and also in the formative stages, because, and also the universities will be very important, because critical thinking is also developed at that level, a deeper critical thinking. So, and then some of these also suggested by our experts. Now, I want to turn to the approaches of the countries, our neighbors, and those who are elsewhere. Singapore, as mentioned, has a law that focuses on online falsehoods that can harm public interest. And some of the remedies in this law will be collection orders. So I think you scale it. And international law also requires us to be proportionate in our response. So if the response to the type of harm can be remedied by a collection order, you don't need to remove it. Takedown order if it's of a graver nature, and then account restrictions would be imposed on such grave offense. So there are penalties involved there. Vietnam also has a decree on this, and it targets interstate service providers, internet service providers as well, and social media platforms. And one of the remedies is removal of content that they define as illegal. Mexico's government has a fact-checking site, so this is also an important countermeasure used broadly, so that there is a government source that counter-checks whatever information, false information is out there. And Finland, as was mentioned, also have national media education policies and new literacies program. This ties deeply into the whole of society or nation approach that was mentioned earlier, because this cannot be addressed by one single law only and penal law only. It also has to be proactive in preventing future susceptibility to this information. Nigeria has a private effort called Africa Check. Canada has anti-online disinformation that has tools relating to different types of specific areas where disinformation happens. And the Netherlands also has a program like Canada and Finland, and they assign this to various ministries. Australia uses a task force to monitor this information, and again, the importance of a media literacy campaign that is meaningful and not just something that you post online and you leave that there. So it has to involve stakeholders like our educational institutions. France has law on election misinformation, so it's very specific and defines particular terms, which we'll turn to earlier. One of the more significant regulations will come from the European Union through the Digital Services Act. Here, the focus would be on platforms, large platforms. I think the threshold is 45 million users or subscribers, and there are certain obligations that are imposed on those platforms for them to be able to operate in the European Union. And just to recall as well that the European Union is an economic union for the most part, and so that's the target. But it also protects EU citizens from harm. So they are obliged to do risk assessments, those companies, to report those risk assessments and to be audited by an independent third party. So, and then if not, then there will be consequences. There will also be penalties there. Germany has a law, as I mentioned earlier, but the context is different. So this is a summary of those. To turn to our approach, and I will go quickly because, of course, as members of the House of Representatives, you are very much aware of these. But we have unprotected speech in our constitutional framework that is already existing. So as mentioned earlier, libel and defamation, some of the ills or the problems that had been mentioned earlier might already be covered by unprotected speech. So these things, of course, Congress can legislate on, can amend the laws that we already have, based as well on case law that the Supreme Court had released interpreting some of these provisions. So these would be helpful guideposts in what is unprotected or protected. The rest that are not covered by those would be protected. And so if Congress, the House of Representatives, decides to pass a law that restricts expression that is not covered by those which are already unprotected, then that law must be analyzed or must be crafted with foresight in mind that challenges to the law that restricts expression might have to contend with these particular tests. And I will not discuss all of them, but the most relevant for us, the Brandenburg test, which is recently reiterated by the court in the anti-terrorism law case, might not be as relevant here because that speaks of incitement. But what is relevant here might be the clear and present danger test. So here, as we can see how the test is formulated, Congress has the right to legislate on an evil that the government has a right to prevent. So that can be very broad. But that legislation can only pass muster, constitutional muster, if, again, the danger is clear and it is present. So my point there is for the legislation to be very, very clear in its policy declaration and in the provisions with respect to the danger that is being addressed and the imminence of that danger. It cannot be something that is hypothetical. And so those are some of the tests that we have, Your Honors, and I'll be open to questions on them later because in the interest of time. But one of the international laws that also govern state conduct is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Here it allows laws that might have an impact on speech as long as it satisfies three tests. The first one is legality. So that means that the law's definition have to be very clear so that the citizen, who in this case we may have an issue of trolls or influencers that will bear the impact, know exactly what conduct to avoid. And that shouldn't also lead to chilling effect. And then the legitimate aim is covered because public order is one of the legitimate aims, as well as respect for the rights and reputations of others, and necessity and proportionality. So the fines should not be too exorbitant, or imprisonment should not be too exorbitant if it's no longer proportionate to what was, let's say, it's misinformation or malinformation as opposed to disinformation. Meta strategy was also discussed earlier. So just breezing through, and maybe I'll end here with the final points on what the U.S. had done. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission Act declares that unlawful, unfair, or deceptive acts or practices that includes influencers. Part of the practice guidance here is for disclosures from influencers. I think we've also heard about this case about the TikTok ban in the U.S., and that's coming from a law that protects U.S. citizens from foreign adversary-controlled applications. So this requires divestment, if you want to continue operating in the country, divestment of the foreign adversaries' stake in the corporation or in the application. And that is narrow here because they define who exactly is a foreign adversary. So they identify particular countries. In the case of TikTok, they identify China. And so these are some of the proposals that were mentioned earlier. I will no longer repeat them, but I am open to questions of Your Honors later. I think the final point is that artificial intelligence might be leveraged for this, but it's a double-edged sword because artificial intelligence had also been used in that disinformation strategy. Thank you very much, Your Honors.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll be allowing the members to ask questions. Konti na naman ang potong magpe-present. We'll be proceeding to the government agencies. Unahin po natin si Secretary Ivan. Thank you for being here on our invitation. You have a presentation, sir? Set? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable
Ano na
Chair.
muna tayo?
The presentation will be presented by our
Mag-end
cybersecurity
muna ba tayo?
Undersecretary Jeff D.
At magre-live na lang pagka
Okay, you said just
pagka
you
medyo
are now
exciting
recognized.
na.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our Secretary of ICT, Secretary Ivan Janway. The presentation po is just an overview of...
You said, can you kindly speak louder?
Kaya makinig
Yung
na lang
mic,
muna tayo.
The reason why we invited the government agencies is to find out if they are compliant with the Republic Act 10175, especially on the implementation of the Cybercrime Investigation Coordinating Center. Kung ito po ay nagpa-function para to abate this problem of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And siguro with your presentation, makaklaro sa ating mga kababayan kung ano na yung estado at kinalalagyan ng ating gobyerno on abating this problem. Thank you, Yusek and Secretary. You can proceed with your presentation.
So Mr. Chair, so there will be two presentations. One presentation from the DICT USEC for cyber, and then the next presentation will be from CICC on specifically what or your point of inquiry.
Yes, so by, sa ano muna, on the point of the